So yeah, Kate and I are both grants officers at Cambridgeshire Community Foundation, and we're a community and philanthropic leader dedicated to improving the quality of life for people in Cambridgeshire and supporting, groups, charities, not-for-profit organisations that are running projects that are supporting people in the county and trying to rebalance inequality. So we actively inspire philanthropic investment from donors. So we have members of staff who focus on kind of getting funds in, getting more donors, speaking to people so we can offer more money out into the county. And then obviously we work really closely with groups and organisations and charities to try and get them funding, try and get them to develop their projects and get more money out into the county. And we also offer a kind of leadership role in kind of encouraging a forum for local groups that are helping in the community to kind of speak about the issues and try and get money to where it's most needed. Okay, so I'll go through a bit about applying to us. So we have 4 deadlines throughout the year, and they're on the 1st of February, 1st of May, 1st of August and 1st of November. And our process takes 4 months. So if you apply, I mean, it might be cutting it a bit fine now for any applications for the 1st of August, which is on Monday. But if you were to apply for that round, then you could expect to hear about an outcome by the end of November. So because we can't offer any retrospective funding, that would be for projects starting from December onwards. So it's good to kind of think ahead and think about when your project will start, and apply to the deadline that's suitable for that. So most of our funds, we have around 70 plus separate funds, and most of them run to those deadlines. Not every fund is open for each deadline. But if you go to our website, then it's broken down by deadline, so you can see which funds are open for which deadline and plan accordingly. So yeah, you might want to plan, to apply for a couple of rounds ahead. We do have a couple of funds that have different deadlines, such as the Amy Community Fund, the Healthy Fenham Fund, and Street Aid and Stay Well, which are both funds for individuals, but we'll go through a bit more about Amy and the Healthy Fenham Fund later on. The best way to find out about the information about eligibility and how to apply is on our website. I've put links in this presentation and I'll share the slides with Lisa afterwards as a PDF, so you'll have access to them, so you can access the links. So yeah, we have a 10-step how to apply section on our website, which is quite thorough, and yeah, it does what it says on the tin. It's a step-by-step guide, so it's quite useful. And then we have a grants page, which is split down by each deadline, as mentioned, so you can kind of have a look there and browse the different funds we have open and see if there's anything that particularly fits any projects that you might have in mind. So yeah, I've just put in here a kind of a snapshot of what our website looks like. So you can go to the apply for funding section at the top there. There's a drop down, and under there we'll have the first bit, will have the how to apply step-by-step guide, and then if you go to the grants page, then it will look like this slide here with all the different deadlines there. And so if you were thinking of applying to the 1st of November deadline, for example, you can click on there and it'll have all the funds that are open for that deadline. Okay, So a bit about what makes a good application and what we kind of look for when we're importing and assessing the applications. Actually, I should probably mention this before we go on. But when you apply to us, it is worthwhile having a read about the different funds that we have open and thinking about how your project fits in with the fund. But you can put an application into us and not specify a particular fund. You can put in a general application, and we as grants officers will take it to whichever donors we think will fund it. So if you don't have an idea, that's absolutely fine. Just put in a general application and we'll find the best place for it. This doesn't apply as much with applications for Amy, for example, because it has a separate application form, so it has a separate process. But yeah, we'll talk about a bit more about that later. So a good application. So the first thing to think about is to make sure that your group is grant ready, and is a not-for-profit structure that we support, and village halls we support, parish councils we support, CICs, CIOs. We can support groups that aren't registered as one of those structures if their income is under £5,000. But as soon as, if it's a small community group, as soon as their income goes over 5,000, then we would ask that they register as one of the structures, a charity or a CIC or a CIO. We also ask that the group has a management committee in place, and we ask that there's at least three members of the management committee that are unrelated and live at different addresses. And then we have a list of required documentation, which I'll go over on the next slide. So once all of those things, if you make sure that those things are in place for your group, then yeah, we can usually take your application forward. So some of the basic housekeeping is just follow the application process for the preferred fund. So on each fund page on our website, there'll be a button on the right hand side that says apply here, and there's all the information there on criteria. So it's just following basically what's advertised on the page, and making sure that your project fits in with that. We ask that you submit your application and documentation by the deadline. So we can't, if it was the 1st of November deadline, we can't accept anything past that, unfortunately. And we do ask that you have your documentation ready by the time that you submit an application, and then be available for an assessment call. So after we've imported and had a good read through all of the applications, then we would have an assessment call with anything that's over £3,500, which is a large grant to us, or any group that hasn't applied to us before. So it's a new group to us, and it's really informal. It's just a chance for us to learn more about the work that you do, about the needs in your area, your project. If we've got any questions, we'll just ask about that. But it's not a guarantee of funding. It's for us to ensure that we have the information that we need. So then when we take it to donor panels, then we can best answer questions. And it's just nice for us to get to know groups and get to know what's happening in the community and what you're up to. So the next thing is to ensure that it meets fund criteria. So some of our funds have geographical eligibility criteria. We have a number of wind farm funds that are only available to parishes in, there's a list on the fund page of 6 or so parishes. Most of our funds are open to groups in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Some of them aren't available to Peterborough groups, but it's all listed on the criteria section on our fund pages. Again, some of our funds specify that they'd like to support projects that are covering a particular need or issue. So we have a couple of funds that are only for projects that are supporting people that are homeless or have housing issues. Again, it's all on the fund pages. Something that we'll look at is the group is charitable and for community benefit. And also some of our funds have funding thresholds. So some of them have a maximum grant size of 1,500. Some of them have an average grant size of 4,000, for example. So it's just, if you're thinking of applying to a particular fund, it's just worth thinking about how much you're looking for, if you think that it's suitable for that fund, if it fits in with the need or issue. Our average grant size is about £4,000 for most of our funds. So yeah, it's kind of thinking about that when you're putting in your application. If you apply for anything more, we can accept it, but it does lower the chances of getting funded. We often, if it's a larger grant size, we may take it to more than one funder. And in those cases, that does kind of, it does, you know, it lessens the likelihood of getting funded by everybody, but it's not impossible. And then the application itself, so it's just worthwhile to kind of think about, I always say to people to try and be as succinct as possible, but to kind of make sure that anyone reading it isn't going to have to ask any questions. So to try and cover everything, but you don't need to write, you know, tons and tons of, you know, if you can try and make it as succinct as possible, then that's really good. And then there's questions in the application form, and it's something that we look out for is need, so that you've looked, you know, you've looked at the reason that you're applying, you know that there's a need in your local area, you know that is something that, you know, it's something that where there's a gap, there's the need there, and that you know about it, that you've spoken to people or explain why you know that the need is there. And then also think about the impact. So the impact of the project, what you think the outcomes will be. And then also the sustainability. So what happens once the funding ends, essentially. We asked for a budget breakdown. So it's good to try and be as thorough as possible there. And try and ensure that it adds up correctly. We ask what is the cost of your project as a whole and what you're applying for. So sometimes groups apply for just, you know, they're getting funding, it's going to cost £10,000 and they're applying to us for £2,500. So it's good to be clear about that's, you know, that's the situation. It's £10,000. You're going to try and get funding for 7.5 from these areas, but you're applying for 2.5. So yeah, think of it as a project as a whole, rather than just applying to us for 2,500 and then saying it's, you know, the whole project is 2,500, because we will come back and have to ask questions about those types of things. And then there's a section to just identify any risks and potential solutions to those risks, if you can think of any. And then, so this comes up later as well as part of our monitoring, but we do have kind of outputs and outcomes, and we will ask you at application stage to think about what the outcomes are, and these are quite specific. So how many people in the local area you've encouraged to take part in community work, or how many new volunteers that you've had as part of the project. So they're just kind of yeah, just trying to think about what you hope to achieve from the project and put some kind of numerical evidence on that. And this is something that will come up in the monitoring form at the end of the project, and you'll be able to report back on if you've reached those outcomes. Okay. So this is the documentation that we ask for. We ask for a governance document which is signed by a management committee member, and also includes a dissolution clause that says if the company organisation is to be dissolved, then the money won't go to the members, it will go to another charitable organisation. We ask for accounts for the most recent financial year, and if it's a new group, then we would ask for just a simple spreadsheet that shows the income and expenditure. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it just needs to be, yeah, a record that, you know, income and expenditure has been captured. And then we ask for a paying in slip or a bank statement, and this must be in the name of the organisation that's applying. And if it's a bank statement, we ask it to be a recent one from the last 3 months. And this is mainly for us to pay securely, and if the application is successful, to make sure that you're paid. And then we have, so we used to ask for safeguarding and equality documents policies to be submitted to us. We have changed the process slightly in that we still ask that you have these in place, that there's a tick box on the application to say that you have them in place. And then we have a couple of questions on the application form where you're asked what is your organisation's approach to safeguarding, and what is your organisation's approach to equality, and if you've had any safeguarding issues recently, how you solved them. So instead of kind of just checking people's policies with a fine-tooth comb, we're just asking people in their own words to describe what they would do, you know, if there was a safeguarding or equality issue that came up. We do ask that these policies are renewed every year, and I believe Kate will probably cover this later, but I think they're still required by Amy and Innovate and Cultivate, two of our funds that award larger grants. So the process is a little bit more detailed, and they do still ask for those policies. And then as part of the application documentation, if you're applying for any capital item that's over £500, we would ask for 3 quotes for those items, just to show that you've done some research into it, and that you're getting the best deal that you can for what your needs are. Cool. So just to go over a couple of the main points, we do, you know, our deadlines are the 1st of February, May, August, November, and we ask that documents do come in at that time. Small grants are 3,400 up to 3,499, and large grants are anything larger than that. We do have, so we ask for less information for smaller grants, and when it comes to monitoring, the monitoring is less intensive for a smaller grant. And we also wouldn't necessarily have an assessment call unless it was a new group. The average grant size is £4,000, except for Amy, Innovate and Cultivate, or any other funds where specified. And applying for significantly higher than 4,000 greatly reduces the likelihood of funding, unless it's for a fund that encourages larger applications. Cool. So I'll just talk a bit about grant monitoring, which is really, really useful for us. It's really important. It's something that we include in donor reports. So every time we have a round with a donor, then we will send over a fund report, which shows how projects they've funded have gone. And they love reading them. It's really great for us to read them. It's just wonderful to hear how groups have done, what their projects have done and achieved. And it's really useful for us to use in our marketing to try and attract more donors so we can get more money to give out in the local area. And it's pretty essential in most, for most charitable funding these days to do some monitoring on a project and to take some photographs and get a case study. And we'll also do our best to try and tweet about anything you send us. So if just to kind of raise awareness of the work that you're doing in your local area. And it's really useful for groups to keep a record of the projects that they've run in the past and have kind of a bank of all, of that kind of information. So then if they're applying for more funding from us or from other funders, it's really useful to have that and to kind of show we did this project and this is what we did, this is how great we are. And it also does impact future funding from us. So if we don't receive grant monitoring, then we will ask a group to submit that monitoring before they can be put forward for any other future funding. So this is kind of just a bit about some of the things we do in terms of monitoring. So when accepting a grant offer, recipients specify expected indicators and outcomes, and those are the things I mentioned earlier. So yeah, things like how many new people were engaged in the community because of your project, how many new volunteers, or there's a whole list of them. And you can just think about what your project is gonna achieve. For larger grants, so anything over 3,500, we'll have a volunteer visit. So we have a group of volunteers who come out and just visit groups, usually towards the end of the project, to kind of help answer any questions that when it's coming up to monitoring, if groups have any. It's a kind of a support thing to just check if there's any questions, if there's any extensions that are needed, if there's been any issues, and also just because we just like to see all the work that's been doing in the county. We like to see what your project has done, and that everything is on track. So yeah, it's usually volunteers, but we as grants officers and our trustees do try and come out as well, just to kind of out of interest and to make connections with people. So if your application is successful and you receive an offer letter, then it will include a monitoring deadline date in there, and it will include a link to your monitoring form. So you'll be able to see upfront the kinds of things that you'll be asked for at the end of the project.
Sarah, we've got a question just come in.
Yeah.
It says, can we submit the same proposal elsewhere while you are considering our application?
Yeah, that's fine. I think a lot of groups do, because they try with several different funders. I think it's just worth putting that in the project budget. So if you put something along the lines of, if you're, like I said earlier, if the project is 10,000 and you're applying to several places, then to kind of mention that somewhere. But it sometimes happens that a group will apply, and then I'll go back to them and they'll say, actually, we've received funding already, so we don't need it anymore. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I don't blame groups, you know, they need funding, so they're going to keep their options open and try as many funders as possible. So it's usually something we'll ask in monitoring, assessment calls as well, just so we have a kind of idea about your situation. Yeah. So yeah, just the monitoring report. It's all done online. You'll receive the link, and then you can fill it out at the end of your project. And we do ask for 2 photographs and a case study for any projects. And it's for the photographs, they're so useful for us. So we try and kind of, you know, let groups know how important they are for us in anything we do, like, you know, like promoting the work that you're doing and putting in reports, future reports to show what's happened in the county, to put in presentations like this. They're just really useful, and we love seeing them as well. We just love, we obviously see a lot of applications and read through them on paper, but to see them in action and in, you know, in photographs and case studies from particular people, it's just really wonderful. So it's worth kind of thinking about that when your project is taking place. And then at the end, once we've received your monitoring report, then they are reviewed and scored by some of our volunteers. This is only for larger grants. And then if anything else is needed, then they'll just try and support groups in submitting a bit more if there hasn't been enough information. And then, as I mentioned, yeah, information shared with donors, so case studies, photographs, any other relevant information. We love to see it, and the donors love to see it, so it's all good. Some groups have started doing videos as well, which is really nice, but it's not essential, but it's really nice to see. And this is just a bit about, again, about the photographs and case studies. So we have some projects who they're working with vulnerable people, it's sensitive information, and so they can't, they anonymize case studies, that's absolutely fine. And for photographs, it doesn't have to be of the people, it doesn't have to be people, it can, if it can be, for example, if a group has done a woodworking course, then you can take a photo of the things that have been created as part of the course. It doesn't have to be people, and obviously it's essential that you gain consent if there is anybody in those photographs. All of this kind of thing is in our offer letter. We have guidelines in there, so we just ask that there's good lighting, it shows action without being blurry, shows what the project has done, and be creative. And this is, some in these presentations are examples of really nice photos we've received from other groups. Okay, so just some of the funds I'll talk about now that I think might be of interest to village halls and parish councils. This slide kind of shows some of the previous projects that we've awarded to other village halls. So in general, are the kind of things that we award grants for are projects that work with, they're usually a year long, and it's less likely that we would award something for like a cooker or I don't know, like a piece of equipment, but if it's part of a wider project, then it's much more likely to get funded. So I tried to pick out some of the things that have been awarded before by some of our funds. So to provide a safe indoor space where your local young people can meet on Friday nights and foster good community relations. And then this next one is kind of, they needed a cooker, but it was kind of thinking about what wider project could be run alongside that, and to increase the chance of them getting funded. So they decided to run a lunch club with people within the community, and as part of that they could apply for the cost of their cooker. To hold a befriending club for older people in the community, to fit out that doesn't make sense, but to fit out the container community shop with the necessary equipment, including fridges and cash till, to run a girl and young women's group for 20 people to build confidence and self-esteem, and to purchase a PA system, and to hold a series of community events throughout the year. So for these are a couple of funds that might be suitable for our 1st of November deadline. So there's the Dean J. Lloyd Fund, and that awards grants to projects that are providing support and relief to those in need. They're particularly interested in the arts, so anything that's including the arts in kind of creating community, protecting the environment, and promoting education. And they're pretty flexible within those areas. So yeah, any creative ideas for, you know, to reach those areas are considered by the donors, and they award grants of up to £3,000, but also award multi-year grants. So if it was a project that was running over 3 years, then a grant of £10,000 would be considered. And the deadlines for that one are 1st of November and 1st of May. And then there's the ARM Community Fund, which is actually open for every round. It's open throughout the year. And the priorities for that one are community development and engagement, children, young people and families, and adults facing life crisis. And they offer grants of up to £3,000 as well. So yeah, then there's the Amy Community Fund, which runs really differently to everything else, and Kate manages it. And so I think it's probably best if Kate jumps in here and gives a bit of information about Amy.
Yeah, so Amy has different deadlines. They're also quarterly, but the deadlines for Amy are 1st of March, 1st of June, 1st of September and 1st of December. It's a 2-stage application process. So you submit online with what's known as an expression of interest, which the idea is that you can tell us about your project, but you don't need to give us all the chapter and verse about what the budget's going to be, but you need to have an idea of the budget. Well, you need to have quite a good idea of the budget, because if your expression of interest is accepted, you need to be able to start quite soon, further down the line, within 6 months of having submitted. It's quite, there are quite a lot of detailed requirements for Amy, but you can apply for a lot more money. So the maximum grant you can get is 100,000. And the minimum grant size is 10,000. So it works for things like extensions to village halls, that kind of thing, or PA systems we've also had. There's also a section that you can apply for environmental improvement, habitat and biodiversity, and that has a lower grant threshold of 5,000 as a minimum application. You need to be within 10 miles of a registered landfill site, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a registered a landfill site could be like, say, Milton Recycling Centre, or it could be a small former quarry that you don't really notice, even though you live quite close to it. So there's a map on our website which will show you where all the licensed landfills are, and you can do a measurement on Google Maps to check. It's 10 miles as the crow flies, to see if your places, most places I would say within the county are. There are a few areas that are a bit of a blank spot, but it doesn't matter who operates the landfill site, so long as it's within Cambridgeshire. So it's only Cambridgeshire, and it doesn't include Peterborough, I'm afraid. Although there are other organisations doing this. So that the Amy Community Fund is part of the national scheme called the Landfill Community Fund, And there are other organisations within that will do funding outside of Cambridgeshire. So for instance, if you're in Peterborough, you might be able to apply for the FCC fund, which is a similar thing. What else do I need to say? Yeah, it's got its own application form on the website. You need to be, whatever your project involves, it needs to be for the widest possible section of community. So they won't accept anything that's sort of single issue if it's only for a particular section of the community. So older people or disabled people or whatever it might be. You have to prove that whatever it is that your facility or your amenity is delivering is for everybody. But that you can apply for, say, play equipment for a new playground outside your village hall, because that's considered to be part of a sort of community benefit for other people, not just the children taking part in the, you know, on the play equipment. But that's something to bear in mind. You will need to, they won't fund 100% of project costs, so you'll need to look into getting match funding from elsewhere. There's no fixed sort of amount that says you have to have, I don't know, 10% match funding, but you do need to, you know, make the effort to find some funding from elsewhere, because they won't fund 100%. And like I say, you need to be quite able to start work on the ground quite quickly if you get the green light to go ahead. So that means you need to have done got some good cost estimates. You will need to do tendering and get quotes and follow best practice. If it's a big project for items over £10,000, for instance, you'll need to go out to tender. And it's a bit of a juggling act, because you kind of need to know what the costs are going to be and have a good idea of how the project will work. But at the same time, you can't claim in the future for projects for costs that have already happened. So for instance, if you have to pay an architect or a quantity surveyor, you wouldn't be able to then include those costs in your project costs from Amy. So usually what people will do is do that sort of stuff using funding from elsewhere or from their own resources, and then it's basically the build cost if it's an extension or something like that that comes from Amy. But yeah, have a look at our website. There's quite a bit of information there, and do get in touch if you've got any other questions about that.
Thanks, Kate. I've put the links in here as well, so when the PDF is sent round, then you can access the right page for Amy just through these slides. So there's a couple of other funds that I thought might be quite suitable for village halls. There's the Cambridgeshire Rural Fund, but the deadline, that one only runs once a year, and the next round is the 1st of May 2023, so it's one to think about for the future. But they have awarded lots of projects that maybe other funds wouldn't necessarily. So kind of they have funded £10,000 towards work on a community centre and things like that. But they just asked that it's supporting rural communities, so it can't be anything that's in a town. It has to be a village, and I think they're more attracted to the more rural the better. And then we have a series of funds that are open for the 1st of February deadline and the 1st of August deadline. They're for wind farms, so if an area has had a wind farm built in that locality, then they have to give a certain amount back to the local community. But these are quite restrictive in terms of geography. There's about 6 of them on our website, so if you go to the fund page, and you can see they're marked as wind farm funds, so you can see the communities that they will accept applications for, sorry. And then there's the Healthy Fenland Fund. Kate, did you want to mention that one?
Yeah, so that is just for Fenland. That we run that in partnership. It's funding comes from the county council, but we run it in partnership with Care Network, who have offices all over the county, but they have a team of people who work on the Healthy Fenland Fund to develop projects, and they give priority to new organisations to sort of setting up grassroots community activity, but they will consider new projects from an existing organisation if it's an area that you're branching out into. So I would say things like, I don't know, there was a badminton club or lunch clubs, something like that. We tend to ask, what happens is people generally get in contact with one of the Care Network staff to discuss the project before submitting an application, and the application is another separate, it has its own form, so you'll need to apply via the Healthy Fenland Fund page, and there's a button on that page that you can click through. But I can give out the details of the Care Network phone number if anybody wants that, or I can give it to Sarah and she can put it in the PDF.
Fantastic. So I just wanted to mention as well our grants bulletin, because we often have kind of ad hoc funds that come out through the year. We receive some funding from our central organisation UKCF, so that is often distributed across the country to community foundations across the whole of the UK. And so yeah, sometimes we'll just have a random fund that comes up. We had one recently for sports clubs in particular. And if you sign up to our grants bulletin, then you'd be able to see, and we communicate any ad hoc funds like that on there. So if you go to our homepage and scroll down to the bottom, then it looks like that, the grants bulletin, and then you can sign up. I think when I send the PDF round, if you just click on this image, then it will take you straight to the place where you can sign up to it as well. But that's quite useful. And then just to say that, yeah, outside of this session, if you've ever got any questions, if you're thinking of applying to a fund but you have any questions, then please be sure to get in contact with us and we'll be able to direct you and help with anything like that if you've got any questions before submitting your application. But yeah, we love seeing group applications from new groups and new projects happening in the area, so please don't hesitate to get in contact if you've got any questions. And thank you for your time today. And I think, yeah, now we've got time to go if there are any questions now.
Sarah, could you close your presentation so that we've kind of got all of the faces on the screen? That would be really helpful, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
There you go.
So does anybody have any questions they'd like to put to Sarah or to Kate? Got 2 pages of people, so you have to bear with us in case you have to scroll through to see if I can catch an eye. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Rosemary, did you want to ask a question?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Rosemary. Yeah.
Okay, I do have to say that I'm about to let the piano tutor in, so I may have to disappear before I get my full answer. So if someone else has got a question first, I'd rather go second.
Okay, Rosemary, that's fine. I've got a gentleman who is indicated as 758104. So, sorry, I don't know your name. You'll have to unmute. Let me see if I can do it for you. Ask to unmute. Are you able to unmute?
Yeah, is that
perfect.
better? Yeah, Bob Bridges, Barrington Village Hall Trustees Committee. We've got this S106 funding, which has been festering and been going on for 5-7 years with the Red Road development of the old quarry cement works here in Barrington. I just wonder how that would impinge, because this part of this funding is designated towards refurbishing or rebuilding the village hall. And we're looking probably at a very healthy sum of probably be into 6 figures. But if we wanted additional funding for, depending on what is proposed in the way of the refurb or new build, would we still be eligible to get additional funding from anybody?
Shall I answer that? I think that sounds very much like an Amy project to me. Yes, definitely S106 funding is great for match funding an Amy project. You could say parcel it up so that the Amy angle covered improving the energy efficiency of the building. So you could go for high spec, you could go for air source heat pump, things like that. You could say that it would be just a section of the build. I would say, it's definitely something worth thinking about. I think I saw Burwell on the list of attendees. We've recently funded some improvements to one of the halls in Burwell with lots of lovely environmental energy efficiency sort of works there. So they might be good people to talk to about that sort of angle. But yeah, definitely an Amy grant. And the Barrington quarry is still counted as a licensed landfill, even though it's not taking waste anymore. It's still valid.
Well, actually, is it still being backfilled by Cemex?
How is it? Okay.
They're hauling trains in there on a daily basis.
Okay.
There's a massive amount of work to be done on the backfill, but this is totally separate from the Red Road development. But the Red Road development will be our source for the S106.
S106. Yeah, definitely. If you want to email me directly,
Yeah.
you can use that instead of putting info@CAMCF. If you just put Kate@CAMCF, I'll get that straight away.
That's great. Lovely. Thank you very much for the information. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Liz from Burwell, did you want to comment there? Because I saw you indicate.
Well, I just wanted to say that we're very grateful to Amy, and we are going to be contacting Amy for our extension, as I know that Kate was talking to Paul at our recent grand opening of the phase 1.
Yeah.
And so if anybody wants to talk to us about how we went about it or what the process was like, if you've not done it before, I'm sure we're all very willing to help out in any way.
Lovely, thanks, Liz. We have had some questions come through on the chat, so I'll just quickly run through them. One question is, do any grants cover for capital projects such as refurbishing car parks?
I think that might be one of the excluded options for as a standalone thing for Amy. I don't think they will do car parks on their own.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are there any kind of grants you could recommend or places where a village hall could go for that? Because I think it's quite a common theme is car park refurbishments.
I don't know any, unless it's part of a wider scheme to, like, say in Barrington, to redevelop the whole site. I don't know of any. I don't know about you, Simon.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Right, so the next question is, does match funding have to be cash or can it be volunteer time as well?
Is that for Amy? I would say if you can tell us about volunteer time, that's great, because it shows community involvement and community commitment and demand for the project. But if you're saying our project's going to cost £100,000, some of that, or whatever, some of that will need to be cash, or from elsewhere. But yeah.
Okay, and the last one's a comment really from somebody saying, thank you very much for the excellent presentation, really helpful, very keen to hear more about energy efficiency, replacement of heating boilers and reduction of energy costs, sorry. So yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Rosemary, did you want to ask your question now?
Thank you, yes. So I work for St Philip's Church, which is obviously a religious organisation, and I see on your website that any religious activity is excluded, which I understand. But we did a huge refurbishment, I think 11 years ago, to make the building available for the community. A lot of the community come in. We're in Romsey Town, so lots of quite needy people around who love our facilities and use them a lot. But how do you assess whether an event has a religious context? If the vicar is present and says a prayer before the lunch, does that mean that lunch club wouldn't get any funding, that sort of thing.
Do you want to answer that, Sarah?
Yeah, you can go for it.
I don't know. I think it's I can't say the word proselytizing, so evangelizing is easier. I think if a project is set in a church and it's open to all, and you can demonstrate that you've got people from all sections of the community regardless of their faith, then so long as you're not trying to convert them, that's fine. It's a sort of grey area, so really it's up to you to argue this is what we're doing and why it's not a religious activity. But I think a grace or a prayer, I don't think that would be counted as
I don't think so. And we have funded lots of other churches and religious groups if their work is just not evangelizing.
And there are some, I mean, actually there are some funds which are much more open to supporting a church group. So Ridgeons, for instance, the family, they are, I believe, Sarah, that they're more open anyway to that. Whereas other groups, maybe corporate groups, are more sort of, they need to be above all partisan sort of, suspicion sort of thing, if you see what I mean. Well, so yeah.
Does Amy award grants?
Amy will, yeah, we can do. There's two different areas. So there's a kind of, you can have a grant for a place of worship or a historic building, which is literally just sort of fabric repair. But I don't think that sounds like what you're talking about. And you can then also, if you're doing, a lot of churches have had grants from Amy for converting areas or adding an extension to enable the space to be used as a community facility. So for instance, if there isn't a village hall nearby, or if there isn't much available, if you're having concerts, if you're having toddler groups, if you're having, I don't know, judo, or what, people use the space in a church for all kinds of things, then that is also eligible for an Amy community grant. So yeah.
Great. One of the things we would like to do is to refurbish the kitchen so that groups can come in and use it. So if there is a group that's having a birthday party, they can use the kitchen. At the moment, it's the commercial kitchen and they can't get in.
Okay. So that sort of thing would be. Yeah, Amy would do that. So it has to be something that's usable by the groups hiring the building. So they won't fund a commercial kitchen so that you could run a food bank, but they will fund the kitchen if the groups can use it themselves.
But also obviously the church would use it on a Sunday to serve coffee.
That's fine. So it's all about the proportion. That's a sort of balance between how many hours it's open for community hire versus how many hours it's open just for worship, or that sort of thing.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we've got another question here. Do you accept funding for community buildings that are not for-profit organisations, not charities, that have income over 5,000?
Yeah, it depends what the structure of the group is. If you're like Sarah said, a community interest company or a CIO.
So we can award to registered charities, parish, town councils, village halls, PCCs, CIOs, CICs, social enterprises which have the social enterprise mark, cooperatives and community benefit societies,
and the sports one,
and sports clubs that are either community amateur sports clubs affiliated with a national governing body, or if they have an income under £5,000.
Brilliant. Lauren, does that answer your question? Did you want to say anything further on that, or are you happy with that response? Lauren hasn't got her camera on, so I can't see, but okay, hopefully Lauren, that has answered the question that you put. She said that's great, thanks. Okay. Are there any more questions from anybody?
Can I?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to, just in response to Mike's comment, I was just going to ask if, for Amy, Kate, do they do things like energy efficiency and solar panels? And
yeah, so long as the if what you're installing is going to improve the facility as a whole, which is used by the community. So if it's the, I mean, there's a sports centre in Soham, I think, that's got an application in at the moment, which has been, it hasn't been funded, but it's accepted as eligible, which is to improve the roofing and insulation and things like that. But because the building itself is used by members of the local community, the school, all sorts of other groups, that's counted as a community facility, and so yeah, that's fine. So it should cover those things.
Thank you. Jeffrey, I think you were next.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. We've had 3 local football teams interested in using our recreation ground at the back of our community centre for training during the winter, and they've expressed an interest to have floodlights installed to the football pitch area, which obviously I think we had one quote which was in the region of about £10,000 to do that. We're not, if we did go ahead and with this project, we strictly wouldn't be targeting the majority of our community, but we would be serving, as I say, several clubs. There's 3 clubs at present. There's another 2 in the wind that would like to come and join us and use the facility. I was wondering if you could advise me where we could perhaps go for that type of funding.
So again, that would be something. Amy has funded floodlighting at tennis clubs and the hockey club in Ely and things like that. The issue there is, I don't know, are you, Jeffrey, is it owned by the parish council, the land, is that?
The hall is owned by the parish council, and
Yeah.
I'm chairman of the recreation ground charity.
Okay.
The building.
Yeah. So then I think the question would be, it's definitely something that would be eligible under Amy, and the question would be, how is it open for anyone if they wanted to book it? So you can have regular bookings from the football club throughout the year, that's fine, but supposing, I don't know, a new group wanted to set up, or say the Scouts or someone locally wanted to have an evening session there, would it be available for them to hire on an ad hoc basis? So then I think, yes, that would be eligible.
Yeah, okay. Well, we do have a brownie group that regularly go out on the recreation ground, and there's no reason why, you know, they couldn't use that facility. So yeah. Okay.
So it's making it available. So at the moment with Amy, facilities have to be available for a minimum of 104 days a year. I mean, that could be, say, weekends, evenings, whatever. But it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be in use 104 days a year. But they're looking at that at the moment, and it may change, but that's how it is at the moment. It has to be, and you have to advertise it on your website and in the village newsletter and things like that, and say this is available and this is the high. You can hire, you know, you can apply a higher charge, but it has to be affordable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with regard to sort of football matches and things over there, we make very little. Yeah. And probably, if they wanted to use the facility for training in the evenings, I'd be lucky if I get them to pay the electric bill, you know.
Okay.
For running those lights, because, you know, all the clubs tell you they've got very little money in things. Which makes it hard for us to justify investing sort of £10,000 for the lights when we're only going to be hitting a small part of our population. So okay, that's really helpful. Thanks for that. We will look into that and perhaps draft something and get it off to Amy.
It is quite competitive. I have to say, I'm a bit worried now that I'm going to get bombarded with loads of
I'm sure it is, but thank you for your advice on that, Kate.
That's all right.
Lovely, thanks, Jeffrey. Is there anybody else who have any questions? I'm just looking through the pages because we've got 2 pages of people. It's a very busy session, this one. Okay, I can't see anybody else indicating to ask a question. So that just leaves me really then to say thank you very much for attending today.
There's one
Sorry,
more-
Lucy.
sorry.
Sorry, there's one from Tim
Oh,
asking.
Yes, well done, thank you. I just nearly missed that. So just so everybody can hear the question, can you explain how the 11% on top of the project costs for the AMI grants, does this have to be paid upfront?
It's a very good question. Sorry, I should have covered that. It has to be paid on claiming the grant. So you claim the grant in after the work's been done, and you need to pay 11% of whatever that grant claim is. So if it's a big project, you can claim it in two slices, and you have to pay 11% of that claim before we can release the funding. It's a very strange system, and it's yes, you're right. The project, that 11% is on top of the project costs, and it has to be paid to AMI. So yeah, and then I see Graham, can you provide professional contacts for the environmental issues? I don't have any, but I would contact Liz at Burwell for advice on those sorts of questions. Might be a good idea.
Fantastic. Liz, you're quite happy for me to put Graham in touch with you? Yeah, fantastic. I'll make sure I do that after the session. And Graham, I'll pass your number over to your email address over to Liz. Just make a note so I don't go and forget to do it. Brilliant. Okay. So I'll just last call for any last questions. Anybody? Nobody's indicating, and there's nothing popped up in the chat. Okay, it's been a really busy session this morning, hasn't it? Can I thank everyone for coming along, but especially my very grateful thanks to Kate and to Sarah for a fantastic presentation. I've really enjoyed listening to the work of Cambridgeshire Community Foundation. I'm sure everybody's found it really useful. As soon as I've received the presentation from Sarah in PDF version, I will send that round to everybody along with a link to the recording. So as I said, please do share the presentation and the the recording onto everyone so that so we can get this message out far and wide. And yeah, I think Sarah and Kate, you're going to be inundated now with Village Hall applications and not know what to do with them all. Anyway, thank you ever so much, everyone. I've really appreciated your attendance today, so thank you.